The blood was still warm on the snow when Ragnar caught the scent. It wasn't the smell of prey. It wasn't the smell of a threat. It was something different, something that made every muscle in his body lock into maximum alert. The alpha wolf stopped in the middle of the frozen trail, his massive paws sinking 15 centimeters into the freshly fallen snow of the Rocky Mountains. His yellow eyes scanned the landscape devastated by the storm from the night before. Trees torn out by the roots. Branches scattered like broken bones. And there, just 20 meters ahead, a wooden cabin completely destroyed, its walls collapsed and its roof caved in. Smoke was still rising from somewhere among the wreckage. Ragnar knew that place. It was human territory. And wolves did not approach human territory. Ever. That was the first rule of survival he had learned from his mother, before she was killed by hunters when he was only 6 months old. That was the rule that had kept him alive for 5 full years, leading his pack in the most isolated regions of Wyoming. But the scent was persistent. Sweet. Warm. Vulnerable. Ragnar took 3 steps forward, each movement calculated, every sense on high alert. His dark gray fur bristled when a gust of wind brought more details. Milk. Fear. And something else he couldn't identify, but that made his chest tighten in a strange way. He growled low, more to himself than to any real threat. Turned to leave. Took 2 steps in the opposite direction. And then he heard it. A whimper. Thin. Desperate. Shattering the silence of the forest like a cry for help that cut across entire mountains. Ragnar closed his eyes. His instinct screamed at him to run. To go back to the pack. To forget whatever was happening in that ruined cabin. But his eyes opened again, and his paws were already moving before his mind could process the decision. He crossed the debris carefully, avoiding rusty nails and broken glass. The scent grew stronger with every step. When he finally rounded a fallen beam, Ragnar saw them. 5 golden retriever puppies huddled inside a soaked cardboard box, shaking so hard the entire box vibrated. They couldn't have been more than 3 weeks old. Their eyes had barely opened. Their golden fur was dirty with mud and melted snow. And they were completely alone. Ragnar instinctively stepped back, his lips curling to reveal sharp fangs. Dogs. Domestic animals. Creatures that had betrayed their own species thousands of years ago to serve humans. Weak creatures. Dependent. Useless for real survival. One of the puppies lifted its tiny head and looked straight at him. Its eyes were blue. Innocent. Completely incapable of understanding that it was staring at a predator who could end their lives in seconds. The puppy let out a soft whimper, almost as if it were asking for help. Ragnar growled. A deep growl that made the other 4 puppies shrink even further inside the wet box. He took a step forward, his fangs now fully exposed. It would be quick. It would be merciful. Nature was cruel, and these puppies had no chance of surviving the cold night that was approaching. He opened his mouth. And stopped. Something inside him broke at that moment. It wasn't logic. It wasn't hunting instinct. It was an old memory, buried so deep that Ragnar didn't even know it existed. The memory of being alone, small, terrified, after the hunters took his mother. The memory of shivering with cold as the snow fell. The memory of thinking he was going to die. He slowly closed his mouth. The puppies kept staring at him, their trembling little bodies forming a small mountain of golden fur and desperation. The wind howled through the wreckage, bringing gusts of snow that were already beginning to cover everything again. In a few hours, that box would be a frozen tomb. Ragnar looked around. There was no sign of humans. No car. No recent footprints other than his own. The storm had been far too violent. Whoever lived here had either fled beforehand or was dead beneath the debris. The alpha wolf growled again, but this time it was different. It was a growl of frustration. Of confusion. Of anger at himself for what he was about to do. He lowered himself and, with a gentleness that completely contradicted his wild nature, picked up the cardboard box with his teeth. The puppies screamed in fright, their whimpers turning into sharp little barks that pierced Ragnar's ears. He ignored the irritating sound and began to walk. Every step was an internal war. Every meter covered was a betrayal of everything he knew about survival. Wolves did not save dogs. Wolves did not risk their own lives for creatures that represented everything they despised. Wolves did not act against their most basic instincts. But Ragnar kept walking. He crossed 2 kilometers of dense forest, avoiding his own pack that was hunting to the west. He couldn't let the others see what he was doing. He couldn't explain something he didn't understand himself. He finally reached a cave he had known since he was a pup, a secret refuge he used when he needed to be alone. He placed the box on the dry ground of the cave and finally let go. His jaws ached. His thoughts were complete chaos. The puppies were still shaking, but now they looked around with childish curiosity. One of them, the smallest of all, tried to climb out of the box with its clumsy legs and fell face-first onto the cave floor. Ragnar watched without moving as the puppy got up, staggered, and then began to crawl toward him. The alpha wolf stepped back 3 steps. The puppy kept advancing, its blue eyes fixed on Ragnar as if he were the most fascinating thing in the world. When it finally reached the wolf's front paw, the puppy lay down against it and closed its eyes, sighing in relief as if it had finally found safety. Ragnar looked at the tiny creature pressed against his paw. His first instinct was to shove it away with a sharp movement. His second instinct was simply to leave the cave and never come back. To let nature take its course. But he did neither. Instead, Ragnar slowly lay down on the cave floor, forming a barrier of warmth around the 5 puppies. They reacted immediately, dragging themselves closer to him, seeking the heat of his thick fur. Within minutes, all 5 were huddled against his chest, their little bodies finally stopping their trembling. The temperature inside the cave began to rise. Outside, night fell quickly, bringing with it the kind of cold that killed unprotected creatures. But inside, protected by the body of an alpha wolf who had broken every rule of his species, 5 golden retriever puppies slept deeply for the first time in hours. Ragnar stayed awake all night, his yellow eyes fixed on the cave entrance, his mind at war with itself. What had he done? Why had he done it? And most importantly, what would happen when the sun rose? Because one thing was certain, those puppies would not survive on their own. And Ragnar, for the first time in his life as a dominant and solitary alpha wolf, had no idea what to do next. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video, and leave a comment telling us what you think so far and which city or country you're watching from. This helps the channel grow a lot and bring more amazing stories like this. When the first ray of sunlight entered through the opening of the cave, Ragnar made a decision that would change everything. He was not going to abandon those puppies. Not yet. But what could an alpha wolf do with 5 domestic dogs who could barely walk? The first need was obvious: food. The puppies began to whimper as soon as they woke up, their empty stomachs demanding nourishment. He watched as they crawled around the cave, searching for something their instincts told them should be there. Ragnar left the cave while the puppies were still sleeping. His paws left marks in the fresh snow as he ran to the hunting grounds. His mind worked frantically, trying to solve a problem no wolf had ever faced. The hunt was quick. Ragnar brought down a young deer in minutes, his strength making the process almost mechanical. But then came the difficult part. Ragnar tore small pieces of meat, chewed them into a paste, and ran back. The puppies were awake, crying so loudly the sound echoed off the walls. When they saw him enter, they all tried to run toward him, their legs causing them to fall constantly. He spat the chewed meat onto the ground. The puppies sniffed it, confused. One of them, a female with a white spot on her chest, licked it experimentally. Made a face. Whimpered louder. Ragnar growled in frustration. Tried again, this time chewing even more, adding saliva until the meat was almost liquid. He gently nudged one of the puppies toward the food with his snout. The puppy licked again. This time, it swallowed a little. Then a little more. Soon, all 5 were eating, their small bodies trembling with effort and hunger. Ragnar watched them, something strange growing inside his chest. Something warm. Something that made his muscles relax for the first time in hours. When they finished, the puppies returned to him, seeking warmth. Ragnar lay down and let them snuggle against his fur. But then a thought struck him like a sharp claw. What would happen when his pack found out? What would happen when the other wolves smelled dog on his fur? He was the alpha. The strongest. But even an alpha could be challenged if he showed weakness. Ragnar opened his eyes and looked at the 5 puppies sleeping against him. So small. So fragile. So completely dependent on someone who should have been their enemy. And for the first time, the alpha wolf felt fear. Not of predators. But fear of himself. Fear of what he had become. 3 days had passed since Ragnar found the puppies, and every hour was a battle. The golden retrievers were growing stronger, but also louder. Their barks echoed through the cave every time Ragnar left to hunt. He needed to cover greater distances, always taking care not to cross paths with his pack. On the morning of the 4th day, everything changed. Ragnar was dragging the remains of an elk when he caught the scent. Wolf. Not just any wolf. It was Coda, his beta. The scent was fresh, very fresh, and it was coming from the direction of the cave. Ragnar's heart raced. He dropped the carcass and ran, his paws flying over the snow. Branches whipped against his face. None of it mattered. All that mattered was arriving before Coda found the puppies. When he reached the entrance, he was panting. Coda was there, standing meters from the opening, his body rigid and alert. His golden eyes were fixed on something inside the cave. The puppies. Ragnar placed himself between Coda and the entrance, his lips curling in a low growl. It was a clear warning. Coda stepped back, surprise evident in his eyes. Alpha. Coda's body language expressed total confusion. Ragnar didn't answer. He simply held his dominant posture, every muscle tense. Coda sniffed the air again. His snout wrinkled as he fully identified the scent. Domestic dogs. Puppies. And Ragnar's scent was mixed with theirs. Why? Coda's question was simple, but heavy. Ragnar had no answer. So he did the only thing an alpha could do. He advanced 3 steps, forcing the beta to retreat even farther. The message was clear: this is none of your concern. Coda lowered his head in submission, but his eyes remained fixed on Ragnar. There was something in that look. It wasn't defiance. It was worse. It was disappointment. Doubt. The first crack in the absolute trust a beta should have in his alpha. When Coda finally moved away and disappeared among the trees, Ragnar knew something had changed forever. The secret was out. Ragnar entered the cave and found the 5 puppies playing, completely unaware of the danger. The smallest ran up to him and began to bite at his paws, its tiny teeth barely tickling. He watched them, and for the first time since finding them, allowed himself to question his decision. Was it worth it? Risking everything for 5 creatures that weren't even his species? The answer came that very night. Ragnar was dozing when he heard it. A sound that made his blood run cold. Howls. Many of them. His entire pack was gathering. It was a call for judgment. Ragnar rose slowly, every movement heavy. The puppies watched him with innocent eyes, having no idea that their existence had set in motion something that could destroy everything. He left the cave and followed the howls. The pack was gathered in a clearing, 12 wolves in total, all staring at him as he emerged from the shadows. Coda was at the front, but he wasn't the one who worried Ragnar. It was Senna, the older alpha female, whose authority was almost as great as his. Her gray eyes studied him with an intensity sharper than any fong. "Show us." Her voice was not a request. Ragnar knew exactly what she was asking. Show the puppies. Bring proof of what everyone had already scented on his fur. He shook his head once. No. The silence that followed was louder than any howl. Several wolves exchanged glances. Others began to growl low. Senna stepped forward. "You protect dogs." It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. "I protect puppies." Ragnar's correction was subtle, but significant. "Puppies that will become servants of humans," Senna shot back, her voice cutting. "Puppies who didn't ask to be born," Ragnar replied, his voice firmer now. "Puppies who were abandoned to die. And should have died." This time it was Coda who spoke, his voice filled with genuine sadness. "That is the law of nature, Alpha. The weak die. The strong survive." Ragnar looked at each member of the pack, one by one. He saw fear in some, anger in others. But he also saw something else. In 2 of the youngest wolves, he saw curiosity. "The law of nature," Ragnar began slowly, "says that an alpha protects his pack. That an alpha makes difficult decisions. That an alpha leads. Leads us where?" Senna challenged. "To weakness." "To choice," Ragnar growled, his control finally breaking. "To having the strength not only to kill, but to decide when not to kill. A different path." Senna laughed, A rough, bitter sound. You call this a path? It's madness. And madness in an alpha is dangerous for the entire pack. The other wolves began to growl in agreement. The circle around Ragnar grew smaller. He could feel the tension building. And then he realized something that made his stomach sink. Senna wasn't just questioning his decision about the puppies. She was questioning his ability to lead. And in a pack, when an alpha was questioned, only two things could happen. He proved his strength, or he was replaced. Ragnar prepared himself. His paws planted firmly in the snow. His muscles tensed. If Senna challenged him, he would have to fight. But then something unexpected happened. One of the youngest wolves, a female named Mira, stepped forward, placing herself beside Ragnar. Her eyes met Senna's. "I want to see," Mira said simply. "I want to see these puppies that caused so much conflict." Senna turned to her, surprise evident. "You dare." "I'm not challenging," Mira cut her off, lowering her head in respect. "I'm asking. As a member of this pack, I have the right to understand before judging." Two other young wolves moved, aligning themselves with Mira. It wasn't a challenge to Senna. It was something more subtle. Senna looked at Ragnar, her eyes narrowed. Then, surprisingly, she nodded once. "Then show us." Ragnar hesitated. Bringing his pack to the puppies was dangerous. But refusing now would be admitting weakness. He turned and began walking back toward the secret cave. The pack followed him in silence, 12 shadows through the dark forest. Every step increased the tension. When they arrived, Ragnar entered first, cautiously. The puppies were awake, playing. When they saw the alpha wolf, they ran to him happily, their barks filling the space. And then the pack entered. 12 wolves filled the icy cave. The puppies froze instantly, their small bodies locking in instinctive terror. What happened in the next seconds would determine everything. The smallest puppy, the one with the white spot on its chest, took 3 steps toward the wolves. Its blue eyes had not yet developed the instinctive fear that should exist between prey and predator. It saw only other canines. Senna growled. A low sound that made the puppy finally stop. The other 4 huddled behind it, trembling violently. Ragnar positioned himself between the puppies and the pack, his protective stance impossible to ignore. "Attack them is to attack me." Mira was the first to move. She circled Ragnar carefully, keeping her body low. She approached the puppies and sniffed the smallest one. "So young," she murmured. "Not even a month old." "Too young to survive without help," another wolf added, a male named Tor. Senna approached, her movements deliberate. She completely ignored Ragnar and came face to face with the puppies. For one terrible moment, Ragnar thought she would attack. But Senna only observed. Her gray eyes studied each puppy, assessing. "They would die within hours without you," she finally said. "Yes." "And you spent 3 days feeding, warming, protecting them." "Yes." 3 days you should have spent with your pack." Ragnar did not answer. "You know what will happen when they grow," Senna continued. "They will seek humans. Their instincts will pull them back. And when they find humans, those humans will follow the trail back. They will find us. Or," Coda intervened for the first time, "they may grow here. Learn to survive. Become something between what they were and what we are." Senna turned on Coda quickly. "You defend this?" "I don't defend it," Coda said carefully. "I only observe possibilities. Ragnar is our alpha. If he sees value in this, perhaps there is something we are not seeing." "Value." Senna spat the word. "What value can there be in raising our opposites?" Ragnar turned to the puppies and, using his snout, gently nudged the smallest toward Senna. "Touch him," Ragnar said. "Feel his heart beating. Look into his eyes." Senna hesitated, her expression a mix of anger and confusion. But then, perhaps out of curiosity, she lowered her snout and touched the puppy. Felt the small body trembling. Saw the genuine fear. And something changed in her face. It wasn't softness. But it was recognition. She was looking at a living being as desperate to survive as any wolf had ever been. "He is afraid," she said quietly. "As you were afraid once," Ragnar replied. "As all of us were. When we were young. when we were vulnerable. Senna stepped back. You are gambling your position on this. You know that. I know. And if I challenge you now? Ragnar straightened his shoulders. Then we will fight. And whoever is stronger will decide the fate of these puppies. The silence was absolute. This was the moment. Senna studied him for long seconds. Then, surprisingly, she stepped back. I do not challenge, she said. But I make a demand. Ragnar waited. If you are going to keep these puppies, they must learn our laws. They must understand what it means to survive as wild. Not as domestic animals, but as hunters. If you fail at this, if they become what their genes say they should be, then the agreement ends. And I will deal with them myself. The threat was clear. But so was the opening. I accept, Ragnar said. Senna nodded, then turned and left the cave. One by one, the others followed her. Mira was the last to leave, and before she went, she looked at Ragnar with something that resembled respect. When he was alone with the puppies again, Ragnar finally allowed his body to relax. His legs trembled with the release of adrenaline. He had won. For now. But Senna's words echoed in his mind. The puppies would need to learn. They would need to become something that might never have existed before. And Ragnar had no idea how to make that happen. The smallest puppy, the one with the white patch on its chest, took 3 steps toward the wolves. His blue eyes had not yet developed the instinctive fear that should exist between prey and predator. He saw only other canines. Senna growled. A low sound that finally made the puppy stop. The other 4 crowded in behind him, trembling violently. Ragnar positioned himself between the puppies and the pack, his protective stance impossible to ignore. To attack them is to attack me. Mira was the first to move. She circled Ragnar carefully, keeping her body low. She approached the puppies and sniffed the smallest one. So young, she murmured. Not even a month old. Too young to survive without help, another wolf added, a male named Tor. Senna approached, her movements deliberate. She completely ignored Ragnar and stood face to face with the puppies. For a terrible moment, Ragnar thought she would attack. But Senna only observed. Her gray eyes studied each puppy, assessing. They would die within hours without you, she finally said. Yes. And you spent 3 days feeding, warming, protecting them. Yes. 3 days you should have spent with your pack. Ragnar did not answer. You know what will happen when they grow. Senna continued. They will look for humans. Their instincts will pull them back. And when they find humans, those humans will follow the trail back. They will find us. Or, Coda intervened for the first time, they might grow up here. Learn to survive. Become something between what they were and what we are. Senna turned on Coda quickly. You defend this. I don't defend it, Coda said carefully. I only observe possibilities. Ragnar is our alpha. If he sees value in this, perhaps there is something we are not seeing. Value. Senna spat the word. What value can there be in raising our opposites? Ragnar turned to the puppies and, using his snout, gently nudged the smallest one toward Senna. Touch him, Ragnar said. Feel his heart beating. Look into his eyes. Senna hesitated, her expression a mix of anger and confusion. But then, perhaps out of curiosity, she lowered her snout and touched the puppy. She felt the small body trembling. She saw the genuine fear. And something changed in her face. It wasn't softness. But it was recognition. She was looking at a living being just as desperate to survive as any wolf had ever been. He is afraid, she said quietly. As you were afraid once, Ragnar replied. As all of us were. When we were young. When we were vulnerable. Senna stepped back. You are gambling your position on this. You know that. I know. And if I challenge you now? Ragnar straightened his shoulders. Then we will fight. And whoever is stronger will decide the fate of these puppies. The silence was absolute. This was the moment. Senna studied him for long seconds. Then, surprisingly, she stepped back. I do not challenge, she said. But I make a demand. Ragnar waited. If you are going to keep these puppies, they must learn our laws. They must understand what it means to survive as wild. Not as domestic animals, but as hunters. If you fail at this, if they become what their genes say they should be, then the agreement ends. And I will deal with them myself. The threat was clear. But so was the opening. I accept, Ragnar said. Senna nodded, then turned and left the cave. One by one, the other wolves followed. Mira was the last to leave, and before she went, she looked at Ragnar with something that resembled respect. When he was alone with the puppies again, Ragnar finally allowed his body to relax. His legs trembled with the release of adrenaline. He had won. For now. But Senna's words echoed in his mind. The puppies would need to learn. They would need to become something that might never have existed before. And Ragnar had no idea how to make that happen. 3 weeks passed after that night. Ragnar transformed his routine. He woke before dawn and took the puppies outside, even when they were still weak. The cold snow burned their delicate paws, but he did not relent. The puppies learned to walk in deep snow. They learned to scent trails. They learned to stay silent when Ragnar growled the command. But the hardest part was teaching them to hunt. Golden retrievers were bred to retrieve, not to kill. Their instincts screamed to bring things back, to please. Every fiber of their DNA fought against what Ragnar was trying to teach. In the 4th week, Ragnar captured a live rabbit. He brought it to the clearing where the puppies waited. He released the rabbit. The animal bolted. "Chase," Ragnar growled. The 5 puppies looked at him, confused. The largest one, whom Ragnar had begun to mentally call Gold, barked happily and started chasing the rabbit. But not to kill it. To play. Ragnar watched, frustration growing, as Gold caught the rabbit, gently took it in his mouth, and brought it back. The puppy dropped it at the alpha wolf's feet and sat, tail wagging, waiting for approval. The rabbit stood there, trembling. Ragnar looked at the puppy. Looked at the rabbit. Looked at the other 4 puppies, tails wagging. And for the first time, Ragnar felt true despair. How do you teach something to kill when every instinct says to save? The answer came from an unexpected place. Mira appeared in the clearing 2 days later. She had been watching from a distance. But now she approached openly. "They won't learn like this," she said without preamble. Ragnar growled low. But Mira did not retreat. "You are trying to make them wolves. But they are not wolves. They never will be." Senna said. "Senna said they need to survive as wild," Mira cut him off. "She didn't say they need to be wolves. There is a difference." Ragnar studied her. "What are you suggesting?" "Dogs hunt differently from wolves. They pursued by endurance, not by ambush. They used speed and persistence." "They were bred to bring back dead ducks," Ragnar shot back. "They were bred from dogs that hunted," Mira corrected. "Those instincts are still there. Just buried." Mira approached the puppies. They flinched at first, but when she kept her posture low, they relaxed. "You teach through need," Mira said. "Stop making it easy. Let them be hungry. Let them feel what it means not to have food." The suggestion made Ragnar's stomach churn. Let them be hungry? But Mira was right. He was protecting them too much. That night, Ragnar did not hunt. The puppies cried. Their little bellies growled. They huddled against Ragnar, searching for food that would not come. Ragnar remained firm, every whimper cutting him like a claw. The next morning, he did not hunt. By afternoon, the puppies stopped crying. They began to sniff around, searching for anything edible. On the third day, Ragnar finally brought prey. A squirrel. Alive. Fast. He released it. This time, when the squirrel bolted, there was no confusion in the puppy's eyes. There was hunger. All five exploded into pursuit. Gold was in front. But he still tried to grab gently. The squirrel bit his snout and escaped. Gold yelped in pain. Blood dripped from his nose. He looked at Ragnar, waiting for comfort. Ragnar did not move. The other puppies continued. Snow, the smallest, was also the smartest. Instead of trying to grab the squirrel directly, she cut it off, forcing it toward the others. It was primitive teamwork. But it was there. The squirrel, cornered, made a mistake. It turned too sharply, lost its balance. And Gold, learning from his pain, did not try to grab gently this time. He attacked. His jaws closed around the neck. One sharp movement. A crack. Silence. Gold dropped the dead squirrel, staring in shock and fascination. Blood stained his golden muzzle. His eyes met Ragnar's. And Ragnar nodded. Once. Approval. The other puppies crowded around. Snow took a bite. And then they were all eating. It wasn't pretty. But it was survival. In the following weeks, the puppies grew. Not just in size, but in skill. They learned to work together. They learned that their prey would fight back. But something was still missing. They hunted when hungry. But they did not hunt like true predators. There was hesitation. And then, in the 6th week, everything changed again. Ragnar was teaching the puppies to track when he sensed it. Another smell. Strong. Close. Bear. A grizzly bear, by the scent. Male. Large. And it was approaching directly. Ragnar growled a command, and the puppies immediately grouped behind him. The bear emerged from the trees 50 meters away. It was enormous, weighing 300 kilos. Its claws were long as knives. And its eyes were fixed on the puppies. For a hungry bear coming out of hibernation, 5 plump puppies were a perfect meal. Ragnar positioned himself between the bear and the puppies, his entire body in a fighting stance. He was large, strong, experienced. But a grizzly bear was another matter. Still, he would not retreat. The bear roared, a sound that made the trees shake. It took 3 heavy steps forward. Ragnar roared back, showing all his fangs. And then he felt something that made him look down. The puppies. All 5 of them had moved. Not backward. Forward. To Ragnar's side. Their small mouths open in sharp growls. Their paws planted firmly. Their bodies trembling not with fear, but with determination. They were protecting Ragnar as much as he was protecting them. And in that moment, looking at 5 puppies facing a grizzly bear with no common sense but with all the heart in the world, Ragnar understood. They would never be wolves. They would never kill like wolves. They would never hunt like wolves. But they had something many wolves did not. Absolute loyalty. Illogical courage. Love that surpassed the instinct for self-preservation. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The bear roared again, louder. But something in the formation of the 6 canines before him made him pause. It was the unshakable determination radiating from that unlikely group. Ragnar took a step forward, and the 5 puppies moved with him, perfectly synchronized. Their growls grew stronger. The bear shook his head, evaluating. Then, surprisingly, took a step back. Then another. It wasn't worth the risk. When the bear finally turned and disappeared completely into the dense trees, Ragnar felt his legs weaken. The puppies, realizing the danger had passed, burst into victorious barks. Ragnar watched them closely, and something inside him warmed. They were different. They were strange. But they were his. And he was theirs. 2 weeks after the encounter with the bear, Ragnar knew he could no longer delay. The pups had grown. They were almost 3 months old now. Their paws were larger. Their bodies stronger. Their hunting skills improved every day. But they were still too young. They still needed him. And that was exactly the problem. Ragnar stood at the entrance of the cave, watching the 5 pups sleeping in a heap. Moonlight cast long shadows across the space. Outside, he could hear the distant howls of his pack. They were hunting without him. Again. In recent weeks, Ragnar had become practically a ghost to his own pack. He appeared occasionally, took part in a few hunts when the pups were sleeping, but always returned to the cave before they woke. Coda had tried to speak with him 3 times. Ragnar had ignored all of them. But tonight would be different. Senna had called a meeting. And when the oldest matriarch called one, everyone attended. Including alphas who were making questionable choices. Ragnar looked at the pups one last time, then quietly left the cave. The meeting was taking place in the same clearing as before. All 12 wolves were there, forming a circle. Ragnar entered and immediately felt the tension in the air. It was not direct hostility. It was worse. It was collective disappointment. Senna stood at the center, her gray eyes fixed on him. "You abandoned us," she said bluntly. "I abandoned no one," Ragnar replied, his voice firm. didn't you? Senna stepped forward. When was the last time you led a hunt? When was the last time you patrolled our territory? When was the last time you acted like an alpha instead of a babysitter? The words cut deep, but Ragnar held his posture. I made an agreement with you. To train the pups. To teach them how to survive. And you did, Mira intervened softly. They hunt. They track. They survive. So what's the problem? Ragnar asked. The problem, Koda said, his voice heavy with sadness, is that you are no longer one of us. You have become one of them. The silence that followed was absolute. Your scent has changed, another wolf added. You smell like dog now more than wolf. Your habits have changed, another said. You sleep during the day. Hunt alone. Avoid the pack. Your heart has changed, Senna finished, and there was something in her voice. Not anger. Genuine sorrow. You are no longer our alpha, Ragnar. You are their alpha. Ragnar looked around the circle. He saw agreement in every pair of eyes. Even Mira, who had been his ally, looked away. So what do you want from me? Ragnar asked quietly. A choice, Senna said simply. The pack or the pups. You cannot have both. That isn't fair. Life isn't fair, Senna shot back. You know that better than anyone. An alpha protects his pack. Always. But you are protecting creatures that will never be part of it. You are sacrificing the good of many for the good of a few. Ragnar felt something break inside him. Because she was right. He knew she was right. In recent weeks, he had neglected his pack. He had placed the needs of 5 pups above the needs of 12 wolves who depended on him. How long do I have? He finally asked. Until the next full moon, Senna said. 3 days. You decide. Either you return to the pack and let the pups follow their own path, or you go with them and never come back. And if I choose the pack, Ragnar asked slowly, what happens to the pups? Senna held his gaze. Nothing. The agreement still stands. They have learned to survive. They can continue living in the forest. Just, far from us. It was not a threat of death. It was something worse. It was abandonment. Ragnar nodded once, then turned and returned to the cave. The next 3 days were the hardest of Ragnar's life. He watched the pups play. Watched them hunt. Watched them grow stronger with every passing hour. And every moment made his decision more impossible. On the morning of the 3rd day, Ragnar took the pups on a long walk through the forest. They followed trails he had never shown them before. Crossed streams. Climbed hills. And then they reached a place Ragnar had not visited in years. A hidden valley, protected by mountains on 3 sides. A stream ran through it. Fruit trees lined the edges. Meadows where prey grazed. It was perfect. Isolated. Safe. The pups explored the valley with excitement, running back and forth, their barks echoing off the mountains. Ragnar watched them and made his decision. As the sun began to set, Ragnar gathered the 5 pups. They sat in a semicircle around him, their tails wagging, waiting for the next lesson. But there would be no next lesson. You are going to stay here, Ragnar said. The pups looked at him, confused. Gold tilted his head to the side. This valley, Ragnar continued, his voice firm despite the pain in his chest, is safe. It has water. It has food. It has shelter. You can live here. Snow stepped forward, her blue eyes fixed on Ragnar. She whimpered softly, a questioning sound. I can't stay, Ragnar said, and for the first time his voice trembled. I have a pack. I have responsibilities. I taught you everything I could. Now you need to go on without me. The pups didn't understand the words, but they understood the tone. They understood the finality. Gold stepped forward and placed his paw on Ragnar's paw, his eyes pleading. Ragnar gently removed the paw. You are strong. You are smart. You will survive. He turned to leave. And all 5 pups followed him. Ragnar stopped. Growled. A clear command, stay. The pups stopped, but they didn't go back. They just stood there, looking at him. Ragnar growled louder. More threatening. The kind of growl that should make any creature retreat. The pups cowered, but did not move. "Stay!" Ragnar roared, using all his alpha voice. Snow began to cry. A broken sound that cut Ragnar deeper than any claw. Gold lay down on the ground, his tail between his legs, but his eyes still locked on Ragnar. Ragnar knew what he needed to do. He knew that if he turned his back and ran, eventually they would stop following. Eventually they would accept it. Eventually they would live their own lives. But when he took the first step, something inside him refused to take the second. He looked at the 5 pups. Creatures that should never have existed in his life. Creatures he had saved against all logic. Creatures he had taught, protected, loved. And he realized something fundamental. The pack was important. Loyalty was important. Tradition was important. But some choices transcended all of that. Ragnar turned fully back toward the pups. They watched him, still trembling, still expecting rejection. "Come," he said softly. The 5 pups exploded into motion, running to him, jumping, barking, licking his face. Ragnar let them, accepting their joy, accepting their devotion, accepting his choice. When the full moon rose that night, Ragnar was not in the clearing with his pack. He was in the hidden valley, lying under the stars, with 5 golden retriever pups sleeping against him. He had made his choice. And for the first time in weeks, he felt peace. But peace did not mean there would be no consequences. The next morning, Coda appeared in the valley. Alone. His body was tense, his eyes cautious. "Senna wants to know your answer," he said without preamble. "I've made my choice," Ragnar replied, standing up. The pups woke and immediately positioned themselves behind him. Coda looked at the pups, then back at Ragnar. "You know what this means." "I do. You can't return. Ever. You are no longer part of the pack." "I understand." Coda hesitated, then stepped forward. For a moment, Ragnar thought the beta would attack. But instead, Coda lowered his head and touched his muzzle to Ragnar's muzzle. "You were the best alpha we ever had," Coda said quietly. "I just hope this is worth what you're losing." "It is," Ragnar said with certainty. Coda nodded once, then turned and disappeared among the trees. Ragnar stood there for a long moment, processing what had just happened. He had lost his pack. He had lost his position. He had lost everything he had worked to build over 5 years. But when snow rubbed against his leg and gold licked his paw, Ragnar realized something. He hadn't lost everything. He had chosen differently. And that choice, as painful as it was the only one he could live with. The following days were strange. Ragnar was used to the constant movement of a pack. Now, there was only silence broken by barking. But there was also freedom. The pups thrived in the valley. Gold became the most skilled hunter. Snow developed frightening intelligence. Together, they formed something new. But the peace would not last. 3 weeks later, Ragnar was teaching the pups how to fish when he caught the scent. Humans. Several of them. Approaching the valley. Ragnar growled, and the 5 pups ran close. "Silence," he ordered. 3 hunters, armed, emerged from the trees. Ragnar knew hunters. His mother had been killed by them. If they saw the pups, they would try to capture them. Ragnar growled a command, "Hide." The pups ran into the bushes and lay down, motionless. Ragnar waited, then walked straight toward the hunters. "Wolf," one shouted. "Don't shoot," another said. Ragnar positioned himself between the hunters and the pups. He growled. "He's protecting something," the third observed. Ragnar moved, always between the humans and the pups. One wrong move would end everything. "That wolf is big. If he attacks, we shoot." Ragnar took steps backward, growling. "He's guiding us away." "Leave him alone," one said, lowering his weapon. "We didn't come for wolves." The others lowered their weapons as well. "Protect your pups." The 3 retreated until they disappeared. Ragnar waited 5 minutes. Growled the all-clear command. The pups emerged, trembling. They ran to Ragnar. But his mind was already working. The hunters knew there was a wolf. They would return. The valley was no longer safe. Ragnar made a decision. They would have to move. Go deeper. When the sun rose, he woke the pups gently. Let's go, he said with determination. The pups followed without hesitation. They were a family now. 6 months had passed since Ragnar left his pack. Winter was returning, bringing with it icy winds and deep snow. But this time, Ragnar was not facing the cold alone. He had 5 companions who had grown so much that sometimes he forgot they were dogs and not wolves. Gold now weighed almost 30 kilograms, his thick golden coat shiny and dense. Snow was smaller, more agile, with eyes that seemed to see through people. The other 3, Shadow, Lightning, and Moon, had each developed their own unique personalities. But most importantly, they had survived. Ragnar had taken them to the most remote parts of the forest, far from humans, far from other packs. There, they built their own life. They hunted together, slept together, protected one another with a ferocity that would surprise anyone who saw them. That particular morning, Ragnar was teaching the 5 how to hunt elk. It was large, dangerous prey that required perfect coordination. One wrong kick from an elk could break bones. Circle, Ragnar growled the command. Immediately, the 5 spread out, forming a wide circle around the elk. Their movements were synchronized, the result of months of training and natural instinct working together. The elk sensed danger. It turned quickly, searching for an escape route. Close in, Ragnar commanded. The circle tightened. The elk charged at Gold, the largest target. But Gold had learned. He dodged at the last second, and snow immediately bit the elk's hind leg, making the animal stumble. After that, it was fast. Perfect teamwork. In less than 3 minutes, the elk was down, and 6 mouths shared the meal. Ragnar watched his pups eat and felt something he never expected to feel after losing his pack. Pride. Peace. Purpose. But then he caught another scent. One that made every hair on his body stand on end. Wolves. Not just 1 or 2. Many. And they were approaching quickly. Ragnar growled the alert command, and immediately the 5 pups stopped eating and clustered behind him. Their mouths still stained with blood, their bodies tense and ready. The pack emerged from the trees. 12 wolves. His former family. At the front was Senna, older now, her gray fur more pronounced. Beside her was Coda, who had taken over as alpha after Ragnar's departure. And Mira, who looked at Ragnar with eyes carrying a message he couldn't decipher. Ragnar, Senna said, her voice still strong despite her age. Senna, Ragnar replied, maintaining a neutral stance. Not hostile, but not submissive. The 12 wolves looked at the 5 golden retrievers. Ragnar could see surprise in their eyes. The pups had grown. They were large, muscular, wild in ways domestic dogs never were. You taught them well, Coda observed, genuine admiration in his voice. I taught them what they needed to know, Ragnar said simply. There was a long silence. Snow took a step forward, growling low at the pack. It was a protective growl, defending Ragnar as much as he had always defended them. Why are you here? Ragnar finally asked. Senna stepped forward. Because I was wrong. The words fell like stones into the silence of the forest. Ragnar blinked, certain he had misheard. I was wrong, Senna repeated, louder this time. When I said you had to choose. When I said you couldn't have both. I was wrong. What changed? Ragnar asked carefully. Mira was the one who answered. 3 weeks ago, a grizzly bear attacked our pack. It severely injured Coda. Killed 2 of our youngest members. We fought, but it wasn't enough. We were strong, but we weren't smart enough. We didn't work together in the right way. And then, Coda continued, his voice hoarse, I remembered how you described the pups working together. How they compensated for each other's weaknesses. How they were loyal beyond logic. And I realized that we had lost something when you left. We lost our ability to see beyond what we have always done, Senna said. To consider that maybe, just maybe, tradition is not always wisdom. That sometimes the hardest choice is the right one. Ragnar looked at his former pack. He saw wounds still healing. He saw tired eyes. He saw wolves who had learned harsh lessons. So what do you want? He asked. We want to learn, Mira said simply. Learn what you taught them. Learn how to be strong in different ways. And, Senna added, her voice growing softer, if you want, we want you to come back. Not as our alpha. Coda earned that right. But as part of the pack. You and your children. The word hung in the air. Children. Not pups. Not dogs. Children. Ragnar looked back at the 5 golden retrievers watching him with absolute trust. Then he looked at the pack that had been his family for 5 years. I can't speak for them, Ragnar said finally, gesturing toward the 5. They are not my servants. They are my equals. If we are to join you, they need to agree too. Senna looked surprised, but nodded. Then ask them. Ragnar turned fully toward the 5 pups. He used body language, low growls, expressions they had learned to read perfectly over the past months. He explained the situation. He explained the choice. Stay alone, just the 6 of them, living in isolation. Or join the pack, gain more protection, but also more rules, more structure. The 5 gathered together, sniffing one another, communicating in ways Ragnar still didn't fully understand. Then Gold stepped forward and looked directly at Senna. He barked once. Loud. Clear. It was a yes. But it wasn't submission. It was partnership. The other 4 lined up beside Gold, their postures identical. They were willing to try. Senna looked at the 5 pups for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she lowered her head. Not full submission, but acknowledgement. Respect. Welcome, she said. What happened in the following weeks changed everything. The 5 golden retrievers did not become wolves. And the pack did not become domesticated. Instead, something new emerged. A hybrid pack where brute strength met adaptive intelligence. Where tradition met innovation. Gold taught the younger wolves how to retrieve prey from difficult places, using his soft retriever mouth to avoid wasting meat. Snow showed hunting techniques that worked better in mixed groups. The wolves, in turn, taught the 5 about healthy hierarchy, about when to fight and when to retreat. Ragnar watched it all unfold with something close to awe. He had thought he was making an impossible choice months earlier. Pack or pups. Tradition or change. But the truth was deeper. It wasn't about choosing. It was about creating something new. About allowing love and logic to coexist. About understanding that strength comes in different forms. 2 months after the reunification, the pack faced its greatest test. Another grizzly bear. Larger than the previous one. More aggressive. This time, when the bear attacked, it wasn't just wolves fighting. It was 17 canines working in perfect harmony. Wolves using brute strength. Golden retrievers using agility and coordination. Ragnar leading not through domination, but through strategy. The bear retreated after 15 minutes. Injured, confused, facing something it had never encountered before. No member of the hybrid pack was seriously injured. When the dust settled and the bear disappeared into the forest, the 17 canines stood together, panting victorious. And Ragnar knew they had found something rare. Balance. That night, as the hybrid pack rested under the stars, Ragnar lay with Snow on one side and Mira on the other. Gold slept against Coda. The boundaries had disappeared. Senna approached and lay down near Ragnar. You taught us something, she said softly. That family isn't about blood. It's about choice. About who you protect when everything is being lost. About who you love when love doesn't make sense. Ragnar looked at the stars. I didn't teach that. They taught me. Then we all learned, Senna said, closing her eyes. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Put in the comments what you thought and which city or country you're watching from. Stories like this deserve to be shared. Because in the end, this story was not about a wolf who saved 5 pups. It was about how 5 pups saved a wolf. Saved him from rigidity. From loneliness. From the belief that strength meant never changing. Ragnar had thought he was teaching survival. But they had taught something more important. How to live. How to love beyond logic. How to protect without possessing. How to lead by serving. And as the full moon shone over the hybrid pack, wolves and golden retrievers sleeping together, trusting one another completely, Ragnar finally understood the deepest truth. True strength is not in never breaking. It is in breaking, and then choosing to rebuild something better than what existed before. He had been a solitary alpha. Powerful. Feared. Respected. Now he was something more. He was a father. He was a teacher. He was a bridge between two worlds. And that, Ragnar realized as his eyes closed, was more than he had ever imagined being. The stars kept shining. The forest kept living. And somewhere in those remote mountains of Wyoming, an impossible pact proved that love was stronger than instinct. That choice was more powerful than destiny. And that sometimes, saving something that shouldn't survive was exactly what needed to happen for you yourself to survive. Ragnar slept deeply that night, surrounded by family he chose and family that chose him back. And for the first time in his life, he felt complete. The months that followed brought inevitable challenges. Not everything was perfect in the hybrid pack. There were moments of tension when instincts clashed. There were days when older wolves questioned strategies suggested by dogs. But they always returned to the fundamental principle: respect above all. Respect based on actions, loyalty, results. And the results spoke for themselves clearly and definitively. The hybrid pack thrived in ways pure packs never could. They hunted more efficiently. They protected territory better. Word spread through the forest about the impossible pack. Other predators learned to avoid that strange group of canines that did not follow normal rules.